We used non-probability convenience sampling technique, and our sample size came out to be 255. A self-developed semi-structured questionnaire was used. The questionnaire was divided into 6 sections from A to F. The sections comprised of demographics, knowledge of drug and its abuse, most common factors influencing drug abuse, practices of drug abuse, and some recommendations. The data was collected using the semi-structured questionnaire as Google Forms that were distributed in WhatsApp groups of students. Pre-testing was also done. We used SPSS to analyze the data, frequencies, percentages, measures of central tendency, variation, tables, and graphs were used to express data, and tests of significance like chi-square and t-tests were also applied. Now on to the results. We saw an association between knowledge of drug and gender in a population sample of 55% females and 44% males. We divided knowledge into 3 categories of good, moderate, and poor, and it was found that 82.7% of females, while only 55% of males had good knowledge of drug, thereby indicating that females had better knowledge of drug abuse. The results were statistically significant with a p-value of less than 0.001. We also found association between knowledge of drug and age. And it was seen that students of age greater than 22 years of age demonstrated better knowledge of drug than those below 22 years of age. Again, the results were statistically significant with a p-value of 0.006. Some of the other key findings of our research were that males tended to encourage others to use drugs more than females. Inhalation was perceived to be the most common route of administration of drugs, and most of the drug abusers were introduced to drugs by their friends. As far as factors encouraging drug abuse were concerned, peer pressure, tendency to seek excitement, depression, accessibility to drugs at parties were considered to be the most common social, behavioral, personal, and campus factors encouraging drug abuse perceived. If we talk about the practices of drug abuse, 11% of the respondents were involved in drug abuse, and majority of them were males with a percentage of 78.6%. Only 21.4% of females were indulged in the habit of drug abuse. As seen by this figure, most common drug of abuse in Pakistan, according to our study, came out to be nicotine in the form of cigarette smoking, with cannabis being the second most common drug of abuse. To conclude our research, females had better knowledge of drug abuse than males, while males practiced abuse of drugs more. Nicotine in the form of cigarettes was most commonly abused. Peer pressure, accessibility to drugs at parties, depression, and tendency to seek excitement were perceived to be the most common factors encouraging drug abuse. Finally, some of the recommendations that we'd like to suggest to combat this problem are to add awareness sessions of drug abuse in curriculum as a mandatory part, to adapt zero tolerance policies against drug abuse. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing this information. Now I would like to invite Ms. Ikra Noor on stage to present her topic, Anomalous Lifestyle Impact on Late Adolescents, Quality of Sleep and Psychological Body Well-being.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ikra Noor, and the topic I'm going to present is Anomalous Lifestyle Impact on Late Adolescents, Quality of Sleep and Psychological Well-being. The content which I'm going to cover is introduction, literature review, objectives, research model, hypothesis, method, results, conclusion, limitation, implementation, and references. Introduction. A pattern of life is an observable manifestation of an underlying regularity in human behavior. Every nation, groups, even single persons has their own lifestyle and based on different things such as culture, economic, geographical context, political, and religious context. Different characteristics play a vital role to support life, like various places, special time, job time, leisure time, fun activities, and diet. Anomalous lifestyle is described as the way of life in which individuals do some harmful activities that create negative impact on health and disturb comfort zone, such as smoking, unhealthy food, no regularity of taking breakfast, excessive use of social media, or long screen time. Take long pauses in food, no regular exercise, and weight gain. Sleep play a key role in maintaining mental and psychological well-being. Positive emotions can have a variety of health-promoting impacts via a variety of mechanisms. Positive mental well-being directly creates positive results on health hormones, psychological conditions, and immunological functioning. Literature review. Gonzalez highlighted in 2013 highlighted meals that are less focused on workout or exercise are more prone towards problematic mental functioning and poor sleep patterns. Varies. Adolescent exercises reported improved sleep patterns. In other researches revealed that when individuals not report his or her sleep issues and only objectively measure these associated with curiosity and less chances of anxiety or depressive symptoms. Many teenagers, on the other hand, lower their physical activity levels at this time. Vocational students in particular report less physical activity than their classmates in conventional high schools. ADDIC in 2013 conducted a research on social media addiction and emotional well-being. The findings reveal that internet addiction has a determinantal impact on psychological well-being. According to Comgris and Gunduz, there is a link between people's emotional and mental well-being and excessive addiction of smartphone. Factors influencing the smartphone addiction and mental well-being of people. Objectives to assess the relationship between anomalous lifestyle, which include insufficient physical activity and screen addiction, quality of sleep, and psychological well-being in adolescence. To find out the mediating role of sleep in relationship between anomalous lifestyle, insufficient physical activity, screen addiction, and psychological well-being in adolescence. Here is the research model. Sleep quality playing a mediating role between psychological well-being and anomalous lifestyle. Psychological well-being is a dependent variable, and anomalous lifestyle include insufficient physical activity and screen addiction, which is our independent variable. Our hypothesis was there will be a relationship between anomalous lifestyle, which include insufficient physical activity and screen addiction, quality of sleep, and psychological well-being. Quality of sleep will mediate the relationship between insufficient physical activity and psychological well-being in adolescence. Quality of sleep will mediate the relation between screen addiction and psychological well-being in adolescence. Methods and measurements. Our sampling strategy was purposive sampling strategy, and we used to collect 300 participants from government and private colleges and as well as University of Lahore with age range between 18 to 21 years. Research design was survey research design, and we use the Rapid Assessment of Physical Activity Scale, RAPA, Washington Health Center 2008, and Smartphone Addiction Scale, Sleep Quality Scale, Psychological Well-being. Here are the results tables. In summary, the analysis of the present study indicates positive relation between sleep quality and psychological well-being, and negative relation between screen addiction, physical activity, and sleep quality. Physical activity show a negative relationship with personal growth, and sleep quality shows significant negative relation with personal growth. The findings reveal that screen addiction negatively predicts the psychological well-being. This present study results reveal that sleep quality is significantly mediates the relationship between screen addiction and psychological well-being. These findings may have implications for interventions to promote healthy lifestyles for the betterment of their psychological well-being. Adolescents should lessen their screen time so that their psychological well-being get more enhanced. It is organized to find out relationship, how to improve the lifestyle and sleep quality to enhance the psychological well-being in late adolescence. Limitations and suggestions. Sample was taken from online sources. If it could be physical, sample size can be more elaborated, which helps to study on large sample size. It was correlational study so that the cause and effect relation could not be determined. This study was conducted only on late adolescents. It must be conducted on adults and older adults too. This study was population which we select was only represent age group between 18 to 21 years. Qualitative studies in this area can provide newer insight and in-depth interest in understanding of the phenomena. Here are the references. Thank you.
Thank you, Ikra. Now it's time to call on stage Mr. Ubaid Azhar again from Rifa International University to present his topic on general awareness and practices in Pakistani populations regarding immunity. Ubaid, please.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. This is my second presentation today. The topic is general awareness and practices in the Pakistani population regarding immunity. So moving on, recently I was introduced to lifestyle medicine by Dr. Shagufta. What is lifestyle medicine? It is a branch of medicine focused on the preventative healthcare and self-care, dealing with research, prevention, and treatment disorders caused by lifestyle factors. I think the definition is really self-explanatory. This year, World Health Organization, they released a report on the Pakistani health, and they mentioned the word that Pakistan is currently experiencing what is called a double burden. What is a double burden? It refers to the coexistence of undernutrition along with overweight, obesity, or diet-related non-communicable diseases. Non-communicable diseases are such as asthma, pulmonary hypertension, and cystic fibrosis. However, coupled with a low literacy rate, low healthcare budget, a population explosion, and insufficient healthcare facilities in Pakistan, they have worsened this condition. And to top all of it off, we have the COVID-19 pandemic, which is still prevalent in Pakistan. Words such as what is immune system, immunity, they were not common among the Pakistani population before the COVID-19. After the COVID-19, everyone was asking questions. What can I do to improve my immune system? So we conducted a study to assess the perception and efforts of the community towards improvement of immunity, to identify changes in knowledge and behavior to boost immunity after COVID-19 outbreak, and identify a safe, healthy lifestyle. The ethical approval was obtained from the Islamic International Medical College. This study was conducted this year from February to April. It was open to anyone who was willing to participate, any person from any background or demographics. It was a descriptive study which implemented a non-convenient random sampling technique. The sample size was estimated to be 500, and it was increased by 18% to a final size of 500 participants using the software RAUSoft with a 95% confidence interval and a 5% margin of error. Again, the survey was conducted on Google Forms. It was made both in Urdu and English to target a wider range of population all across Pakistan from areas such as Balochistan, KPK, Sindh, Karachi. The first section of the survey included questions such as demographics. The second will include questions which asked them how, according to them, recent events of COVID-19 affected their knowledge and practices to boost their immunity. So in order to get a proper understanding, we implemented different scales such as the Likert and the linear scale. Data was analyzed through the SPS software. P-value less than 0.05 was considered significant. Univariate and multivariate analysis was performed to compare the immunity and knowledge of scores with each variable of interest. A chi-square test was performed to find significant relationships, and to test the reliability of the scales, the Cronbach's alpha was conducted, and a value of 0.628 was obtained, with any value of 0.6 above 0.6 considered acceptable. So just touching upon briefly of the results. Of the 500 responses that we analyzed, approximately 37% participants showed improvement in knowledge and behavior regarding immunity due to COVID-19, and 18% indicated having low immunity due to insufficient knowledge prior to COVID-19. Looking at the first diagram, we asked the question, when do you learn about emerging health concerns? 32.3% of people said we only learn about health concerns if we're at risk, which means they do not take preventative measures to prevent the disease from happening unless they're impacted by it. Looking at the second figure, we asked the question, do you take any medicine or perform stress relieving exercise or immunity? Whereas 52% of people said that they know they do not take any medicine or stress relieving exercise, but they know it helps with immunity. So that means people were lacking the initiative to take the necessary change in lifestyle but they knew about the knowledge, but they lacked the initiative to have that change in their daily lifestyle. Moving on to the results. Touching more briefly, upon the multivariate analysis, we found a correlation, inverse relationship between stress level and perceived health. Second, what we found is that people who are taking homeopathic medicine were considered themselves to be of immune system of good function health. People who were more willing to take non-obligatory vaccines, they had a higher knowledge of immunity as compared to the general population. Lastly, I'm moving to the results. About 58% of participants agree that lifestyle modifications such as exercise, diet, and sleeping patterns does in fact help with improve immunity. The government needs to conduct health educational campaigns to raise awareness regarding immunity and proper guidelines to create a healthy environment. However, half of the study participants indicated low immunity due to financial constraints. Hence, the government should provide some support to those who need it. And thank you. That was my presentation.
Thank you very much for choosing this topic. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Dr. Zohaib Masood from Fazaya Medical College to present his topic on malnourished children below 5 years of age in Islamabad missed through the current WHO guidelines.
Respected guests, here and not here, Assalamu alaikum. I'm Dr. Zohaib Masood. I'm going to be presenting my topic, detection of malnourished children below 5 years of age in Islamabad being missed through current WHO guidelines. Our topic deals with malnutrition and related anthropometric measurements. Malnutrition is a major global health problem and affects almost 165 million children globally annually. And it is the major cause of morbidity and mortality in under 5 years of age. In Pakistan, we have the highest rates of malnutrition compared to other regional developing countries, and we have made little progress for it in the past 20 years. A national nutritional survey done in 2011 showed that 33% of our children were underweight, 44% were stunted, 15% were wasted, and 50% anemic. Weight for height Z-scores is a gold standard for detection of malnutrition, but MWOC is a better community screening tool as weight for height Z is a cumbersome as compared to MWOC. However, adjustments need to be made in the cutoffs of MWOC according to the gender and age so that it better reflects weight for height Z scores. To assess nutritional, the main aim of our age was to assess nutritional status of children less than 5 years of age and to evaluate the correct cutoffs for MWOC by comparing it with weight for height Z scores and to assess the nutritional status of children less than 5 years of age. We did a cross-sectional study in pediatric OPD of PIMS, and our sample size was 112 children. We excluded children who were severely ill or who had congenital diseases. We used WHO Answer software and SPSS software for data interpretation. Our results showed that, this is the main slide, our results showed that MWOC detected more children in severely acute malnourished as compared to weight for height Z scores. It shows that 13% of children were moderately malnourished and 7% were severely malnourished as compared to the weight for height Z scores. It showed that 3% of students were severely acutely malnourished and 14% were malnourished. Now, moderate malnourishment on basis of MWOC and weight for height Z scores, it was almost identical. However, severe malnourishment was better detected with MWOC as compared to the weight for height Z scores. It also showed that the risk factors for malnourishment in those children included a family size larger than 5, mother education level below secondary levels, and multiparity in mothers. We use Fisher's exact test for cross-tabulation because the sample size was small, so we couldn't use chi-squares. It showed that malaria, dengue fever, and anemia in the previous 3 months had significant impact on the malnourishment. Assessing the nutritional status, we found out that almost 75% of our children were not adequately fed according to their age. They were taking less calories that was required for them on their daily basis. And weaning was started and only said 4% of children, while 66% were weaned at later ages. And exclusive breastfeeding was done in only 7% of cases, and 53% of families did not exclusively breastfeed their child. We concluded that MWOC detected more cases of severe malnutrition and more cases of malnutrition overall. Mock cutoffs need adjustment so that it can become a singular community tool which is easy to use. We also concluded that current feeding practices are inadequate to meet the nutritional demands of children. And we said that various social demographic factors like mother's age, parity, and the mother's education are involved in the malnutrition of children. We recommend that a large-scale national study should be undertaken so that appropriate adjustments can be made to the current cutoffs of diagnostic criteria of malnutrition. Community screening with appropriate adjusted cutoff of mocks and weight for high risk scores should be started so that treatment of the affected children should all be initiated. And finally, the raising awareness at national level for appropriate feeding practices and socio-demographic factors, including to the current burden of malnutrition, is also necessary. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing this piece of knowledge. It's time to call our next presenter, Ms. Adina Khurram from Fazaya Medical College, on topic reasons for current increase in tobacco smoking among the teenagers in Islamabad, Pakistan.
Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adina Khurram and I'm here. I'm a fourth-year medical student of Fazaya Medical College. I am presenting on behalf of my group here. The topic of my research group was to find out the reasons for current increase in tobacco smoking amongst teenagers in Islamabad. As we all know, smoking is on the rise amongst teenagers, and according to WHO, more than 4 million deaths are recorded worldwide due to the diseases caused by smoking. But we are on an advantage because it can be easily prevented just by quitting. The reason why we conducted our research was that smoking causes a number of diseases at an early age, leading to an early death. Therefore, there was a need to identify the socio-demographic factors and the reasons which are leading to an increase in tobacco smoking, and also to find out the proportion of smokers in our study population. A descriptive cross-sectional survey was conducted amongst teenagers, both male and female, from different schools and colleges of Islamabad, and the permission to do so was granted by IRB committee, Fazaya Medical College. With a confidence level of 95% and a 10% of margin error, a sample size of 97 was calculated. The respondents we received were 122 in total. Data was collected through snowball sampling via online questionnaires, which were developed on Google Forms. The self-administered questionnaires included questions regarding various socio-demographic factors and reasons for current increase in tobacco smoking. Data collected was analyzed via SPSS version 23. Our results are as follows. Among the socio-demographic factors, it was found out that 44 males being more prominent and 7 females started smoking between 17 to 19 years of age. The reason that contributed to an increase in tobacco smoking came out as 85% started smoking due to decrease in stress, 77% of them started smoking because it was easily accessible, 72% of them started it as it gives them pleasurable feeling, smoking to look cool, peer pressure, and influence of siblings came out to be the reasons contributing to an increase in tobacco smoking. From our study results, we concluded that the reason why teenagers smoke came out to be multifactorial, which include easy access, decrease in stress, and pleasurable feeling. However, there were some limitations to our study. Due to COVID pandemic, we couldn't reach out to all the teenagers, like those who do not have access to the internet and those who do not go to school or college. That is why we would like to recommend that further studies should be carried out, which include all the teenagers from different socio-demographic backgrounds, increasing extracurricular activities in school to decrease the stress, imposing age restrictions on buying cigarettes, and levying heavy taxes on tobacco products. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The last presentation for this session is from Hamza Waqar from Fazaya Medical College on the topic development of health problems due to screen exposure and different electronic gadgets in Air University students.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Dear ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. Medical College, and the topic of my research is development of health problems due to screen exposure on different electronic gadgets in Air University students. As we all know, we are living in an era of technology and continuous advancement. Now, every new day comes up with a new intervention, and people like to spend a lot of their free time on mobiles, laptops, watching television, playing video games. Likewise, university students spend a lot of time on laptop, mobile, and video games for entertainment and education purposes. And in the past, studies have been done in Saudi Arabia, India, and King Edward Medical University, Pakistan, Lahore, showing that unlimited screen exposure and prevalence of health problems are associated. So what we intend to do was to find out the average screen time spent by students and its association with frequency of adverse physiological and psychological effects on students' health, and to check whether these problems increased, decreased, or remain unchanged during the corona pandemic due to a change of online mode of the studying and teaching. Our study was quantitative, cross-sectional analytical study, including all the Air University students of age 18 years or plus, and those were excluded who had congenital ophthalmic, posture-related, congenital neurological, psychological problems, or any problems due to a traumatic event. We used convenient sampling, and sample size was calculated by survey system calculator that came out 367. But God knows, due to uncertain condition and corona comes, and we had to shift our questionnaire to Google Form document. So we sent to the group email IDs of Air University students, and students respond according to their convenience. The total number of responses we got were only 179, and we used Google Form questionnaire. The most important part of my presentation is results. More than 57% of the participants reported their average screen time per day more than 6 hours, while only 2% reported it to up 2 hours per day. We actually cross-tabulated screen time variables with the health problem variables, and wrist pain came out associated with screen time of more than 6 hours per day. Likewise, pain in the neck, backache, burning sensation in eyes, watering of eyes, headache, neck pain with the screen distance less than 25 centimeters, and bad posture while using screen. The most interesting part is more than 80% of the participants reported clear increase in the frequency of ophthalmic and other health problems due to online teaching and studying during the corona pandemic, while 15% think their complaints remain unchanged. What I can conclude about my study is excessive and unaided screen exposure for more than 6 hours with bad posture, like standing less than 25 centimeter distance from the screen and less percentage brightness while using screen on different gadgets, is associated with development of many ophthalmic and general health problems. What I can recommend after my study is we have to adopt good habits of screen usage, like sitting on a chair, wearing glasses, following 20-20 rule of the ophthalmologist. Like you have to work for 20 minutes on the computer, then you have to take a break of 20 seconds at least. In the break, you have to look 20 feet far apart, and you have to 20 times blink your eye in 1 minute at least. And what are the future implications? Yes, it will create awareness in the students that how to use their screen time beneficially. It should not be more than 6 hours, and it should avoid unnecessary scrolling on the social media. And it will set guidelines for the authorities to design online education system and its timetable in such a way that students are not continuously exposed to the screen rays. In the end, I would like to say, "Ay Shafi, tujhe wasta teri badai ka, ab Hamza ko bhi ata kar, Ejaz Masihai ka." Thank you so very much for your kind anticipation.
That's all for today's session. A big round of applause for all the presenters. Now I would request our Honorable Chairperson, Brigadier Retired Professor Dr. Akbar Waheed, Sitara Imtiaz Military, to come on stage and conclude this session. Please.
Now, I think that this lifestyle medicine is not a new subject. It is being taught to the mankind since olden days. We all know the importance of nutrition, exercise. So, but more, in my opinion, the more important factor nowadays are the psychological factors, and especially at the extreme of ages, especially in the children, and more important in the older people, and especially after retirement. because after retirement of old people, the lifestyle is altogether changed. So we should look into it in these extreme of ages, and we should care about these people. Otherwise, all you know about, so much has been taught and so much has been said. So we should look into the extreme of ages, and especially in the old people. Thank you.